Good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR and welcome back to another video. Every generation introduces dozens of new moves and most of the time they seem like they all have a purpose. Most of the time. But sometimes there are moves that are so bad that I have to stand in the shower and wonder why they were even made in the first place. These are the worst moves in every generation. But before we get into that, let's hear from the sponsor of today's video, Factor 75. Factor has recently been acquired by HelloFresh, so you already know the food you'll be getting from them is second to none. I know you guys must have goals for the new year set, so why not get off on the right foot with healthy meals from Factor? There's no need to go out shopping or spend gross amounts of time preparing food. With Factor's fresh, never frozen, pre-packaged meals, you can be ready to eat in as little as 2 minutes. And the best part is, you can customize your shipments to fit your lifestyle. Keto, vegetarian, vegan, they have all the best options to make it work for you. I've already been using Factor myself this January, and after only a few meals, I immediately feel better about my overall health. And of course, it saves me tons of time worrying about what to prepare next. So if you're ready to start living a healthier life with great food, then be sure to head to Factor75.com or click the link down below and use code JPRPoketrainer60 to get 60% off your first Factor box. Thank you Factor for sponsoring, let's get back to the video. Now, Gen 1 is probably the hardest to pick from. Okay, I'm taking Splash out of the pool, it's a little too obvious. Naturally, as the gen with the most moves introduced, and also the least power creep generation, there are quite a few stinkers here. One that we discussed in a previous video was Rock Throw, which used to have an insultingly low accuracy of 65%. It's like hitting a Focus Blast with less than half the reward. But as bad as that move was, at least it had a purpose, as it's the only rock-type move available for low-level rock types in Gen 1. Rage is also an awful move, as in Gen 1 it actually locks you in and only raises your attack stat after you've been hit. Which is horrible, but don't get me wrong, it's still not the worst. No, we're looking for stuff way worse than that. Stuff that isn't just bad, but downright meaningless. And I think I found my two winners. The first is Constrict. This is a normal type attack with 10 power. And its bonus effect? A 33% chance to lower the opponent's speed by 1 stage. You cannot be serious! You're telling me that you made the move with the single lowest base power of all moves not even have a guaranteed secondary effect? Would a 100% chance of lowering speed really be a deal breaker here? And what's funnier is that this move is constantly confused with Wrap, which is certainly one of the most broken Gen 1 moves, since you literally can't attack while being wrapped. This means if an opponent is faster than you and they never miss, you just don't get to attack. But this isn't about you, Wrap. This is about your red-haired stepchild. Actually, that description feels way too generous. I formally apologize to all red-haired stepchildren. I didn't mean it like that. But it's genuinely mind-boggling how this move has not only survived all 9 generations, but has also never been buffed in any way. I know we're early in the video, but it wouldn't be a stretch to call this the worst move of all time. And the other Gen 1 move is one that we've covered before, but just in case you didn't watch that video, it's Kadabra and Alakazam's signature move, Kinesis. As a quick rundown, it's basically Sand Attack, but with 20% less accuracy. And maybe, just maybe, back when Flash was only 70% accuracy, you could argue that Kinesis was worth using. Actually, it definitely wasn't. But since Gen 4, Flash has had 100% accuracy, and that's a move that Kadabra and Alakazam can learn. So what even is the purpose of Kinesis anymore? Honestly, this move needs to be retooled to do damage to steel types or something like that. Otherwise, this might be even more obsolete than Constrict. Gen 2 likewise has some pretty bad contenders. Nightmare is a move that's similar to Dream Eater, only works on sleeping Pokemon. It inflicts the Nightmare status where a sleeping Pokemon loses 25% of its HP at the end of every turn. But realistically, who is using this move? Basically, any other action you take when an opponent is asleep is going to be better than Nightmare. Like, surely you have a better attack that can either set you up or do more damage than just 25%. Plus, since Gen 4, only 6 Pokemon have been able to use this attack. Darkrai, what are you doing here? You have an ability that does this for you! That's like watering your plants in a hurricane! And rightfully, since Gen 8, this move has been missing in all games. Good call, Game Freak. I couldn't agree more. Now, about Constrict, but wait, Gen 2 didn't stop there with oddly bad sleep-related moves, because Snore also exists. This is a base 50 power normal type attack that can only be used when sleeping. It does have a 30% chance of flinching, but I really can't think of any scenario where you'd rather use this over Sleep Talk. It was even worse back in the day, if you can believe it. It was only 40 base power prior to Gen 6, and prior to Gen 4, if you used this move, then the turn wouldn't count towards your total number of turns asleep. You'd think they'd take this move out like they did with Nightmare, but it actually got promoted to a TM in Sword and Shield. Delibird's signature move Present is also quite bad, but we discussed that last week, so I don't think it really bears repeating. Twister is another remarkably bad move from this gen, a 40 base power Dragon-type attack with a 20% chance to flinch. Weak Dragon-type attacks are already pretty worthless to carry with you in the main story, since dragons are exceptionally rare to fight against, but this one is so weak that it's not even good for that. In the more modern games, Twister now does double damage to opponents using Fly, Bounce, or Sky Drop, but that's so situational it's almost like the bonus effect doesn't exist at all. In Gen 3, we have a litany of bad status moves, spearheaded by Roleplay. This move copies the target's ability, which may not sound bad if you're trying to copy a Pokemon with a really good ability, like Intimidate or something like that, but on that one turn you wasted copying an ability, your opponent is already using theirs to take you out. But that's hardly as bad as Camouflage is, especially in Gen 3 itself, when it can only be learned by Staryu and Starmie. This move changes the user's type to match the surrounding environment or terrain. Wait a minute, is this just beta terrestrialization? But bad? Yeah, Starmie is meant to be a purely offensive Pokemon, so I can't imagine why you'd ever want to change your type for defensive purposes. Sure, other Pokemon learn this move now, but it's not much better with them. Snatch is also quite bad, as it requires a hard read for your opponent to set up on that turn. And preferably they try to set up with a move that would be beneficial for you as well. Because if you were a Weavile and you snatch an opponent's Nasty Plot, it's like, well, that turn just didn't happen, I guess. 90% of the time, the only thing this move is snatching is a good slot for your other moves. And I can say the same thing about an equally inconsistent move, Grudge. Basically, if the user faints in the same turn that it used Grudge on, then the attacker will lose all the PP of its last move. I think there's another similar version of this move out there. What was it called? Oh yeah, Destiny Bond! Yeah, who would want to actually take down the whole Pokemon where you can just drain its PP? Ah, yeah, of course! Why didn't I think of that? Yeah, don't use this move. But arguably the worst status moves from this gen are the two damage reduction moves, Mud Sport and Water Sport. These moves make the user more resistant to electric and fire moves respectively. Yo dog, I heard your ground type doesn't like electricity, so I gave you a resistance on top of your immunity. It's genius! And to make it better, in Gen 3, these effects fade as soon as you switch out of battle, so you don't even get to transfer those resistances to Pokemon who might actually need them. And honestly, I could keep going. Assist, Refresh, Imprison, and so on. But honestly, I don't think we're gonna find a move quite as bad as these two. So props to them for being the worst of the worst. That was a hard battle to win this gen. In Gen 4, fortunately the bar for moves would be raised a lot higher, but that didn't stop a few stinkers from sneaking through the cracks. Miracle Eye is a very underwhelming status move. It basically removes an opponent's evasion buffs and also makes Dark types able to be hit by Psychic type moves. Look buddy, all I gotta say is if you're in that situation, it would be easier for all of us if you just went ahead and accepted defeat. This is basically the Psychic-type version of Odor Sleuth from Gen 3, which I neglected to mention given how bad Gen 3's other moves are, but at least that's somewhat useful for getting through the early game double team spammers. But with Miracle Eye, the Pokemon that get it are so much later in the game that it really doesn't see any usage at all. And as far as offensive moves go, Natural Gift is certainly not great, as it requires a held berry to be used to determine the type and power of the move. Now admittedly, this can give very powerful coverage moves to Pokemon that typically wouldn't learn them. Like, who wouldn't want a 100 base power fire move on a Meganium? But the problem is, you have to consume your Watmole berry to use it. I've literally never seen this berry before. Is that a real thing? Sure, for shots and goggles, you can use it against a friend to catch them off guard, or get yourself out of a sticky Nuzlocke situation. But it's really not worth using in any competitive format because you're literally giving up the ability to use an actual held item for a once per battle attack. But that's still probably not the worst Gen 4 move. Trump Card essentially functions like Rage with a new coat of paint. Instead of the power building up from taking damage, Trump Card gains more power the less PP it has, starting at 40 and ending at 200. But just like Rage, it takes entirely too long to build up for this to ever be a decent competitive move. I could see it being good for Nuzlocke where you waste the first 4 PP on wild Pokemon, then use the last 200 base power nuke to KO a harder gym leader or champion Pokemon, but aside from that very situational occurrence, I wouldn't even bother. In Gen 5, pretty much every bad move here is an exceptionally strange Psychic type move that leaves you scratching your head as to why you'd ever use them. Magic Room suppresses all Pokemon's held item effects, not to be confused with Wonder Room, which flips the defense and special defense stats of all the Pokemon on the field. There's also Power Split and Guard Split, which averages your offensive and defensive stats with the target. Shuckle can at least get some mileage at a Power Split by nerfing an opponent's attack stats into oblivion, and in doubles he could use Guard Split to make an ally much more bulky, but aside from Shuckle, who frankly has way better options, I don't really see any other Pokemon getting usage out of these moves. And even offensively, Psychic keeps throwing horrid moves our way. Synchronoise, a Psychic type move that only damages other Pokemon that share a type with the user. Why? Half the Pokemon that learn this are Psychic types that resist themselves. What were they thinking? And this move used to only have 70 base power. That's so low for a move with almost zero utility. Sure, now it's been buffed to 120, but it still sucks. The best user of this move is Chatot, who can damage 164 different Pokemon due to being a normal flying type, but that still means there are 844 Pokemon who are immune to this move. Pack it up, boys. I don't think we're finding one worse than this. But hey, there is one Pokemon that doesn't learn any of these bad moves, and that would be my good buddy Gunsparce. And he promises to not use any of his moves if you just scroll down and hit that subscribe button, or like the video if you already did. Okay, thanks. A common theme of terrible Gen 6 moves is just failed VGC experiments, with one of the worst certainly being Rototiller. A relatively rare move mostly learned by ground types, this move will raise the attack and special attack stats of all the grass types in the field. Don't most grass types already have growth though? Plus, usually you'd want to either go for Nasty Plot or Swords Dance, not set up both stats at the same time for half the gain. On top of that, only 3 Pokemon can actually use this move to buff themselves: Parasect, Cacturne, and Tapu Bulu. I guess maybe the thought process behind this move is that you could use it in doubles to buff a grass-type ally while they protect themselves, but honestly, it's just another in a long line of overly situational moves that everyone is just gonna gloss over. But believe it or not, we could actually go worse than this. Greninja's former signature move, Mat Block, isn't much of a useful tool either. This move is just the love child of Protect and Wide Guard, but without any priority. And only 2 gens after it was introduced, it was already being shipped off to the orphanage. The fatal flaw of this move is that it gets hard countered by stuff like Fake Out, you know, a super common VGC move. Pretty much the only application this move might have is protecting a slower teammate trying to set up Trick Room or something like that. I know Greninja is pretty fast, so you might be thinking it can't possibly be that bad, but just remember how many Prankster Pokemon, Priority Users, and Choice Scarf Pokemon there are in VGC. It's just too easy to play around. And I know since this is a Greninja move, I'm probably gonna get comments about how Mat Block was actually an amazing move at the Timmy's Birthday Invitational in 2014. Great for you, but I don't care. Ion Deluge is similarly bad. This move can only be effectively used in doubles, as it makes all the normal type attacks change to electric type attacks for the remainder of the turn. This is just getting electric coverage in your team with extra steps. Why not just use Thunderbolt with the Pokemon that's using Ion Deluge? Naturally, this would be another one that Game Freak threw in the trash bin 6 short years later. Electrify has a similar effect, it just makes the opponent's next move an electric type move, which I literally can't think of a single applicable use for this unless you have a teammate with Lightning Rod or something, and even then, it's definitely not worth a move slot. But electric didn't stop there, unfortunately, because they also have Magnetic Flux, a move that raises the defense and special defense of all allied Pokemon, but only if they have plus or minus as an ability. You know, those abilities that we talked about in a past video about bad abilities? That's usually a good sign to avoid anything associated with it. And that includes Magnetic Flux. Aromatisse's former signature move, Aromatic Mist, also falls into this bad doubles category, as it simply raises an ally's special defense by 1 stage. And honestly, there are so many more bad Gen 6 moves, which is very surprising given how few moves this gen introduced. Like Forest Curse, Trick or Treat, Happy Hour, Powder. I was beginning to wonder how I was possibly going to choose a definitive worst one. But thankfully, Game Freak did that for me by inventing these 2 event-exclusive moves, Celebrate and Hold Hands. Attacks that do absolutely nothing. And no, That's not an exaggeration. So thank you, Game Freak, I appreciate that. I would have been here all night trying to break down which of these moves was the actual worst of the worst otherwise. Gen 7 certainly wouldn't let up with the bad doubles moves though, as it gave us Spotlight, a move that sorta acts like Follow Me, but can redirect moves onto an ally or an opponent. Which is something that you already have control over. Also, you could just use Protect. Now, if you could use this move on an opponent to make their teammate hit them, then it would be pretty broken. But it doesn't work like that. Pretty much the only purpose of this move is to override the effects of things like Follow Me, Rage Powder, or Ally Switch. But again, like so many other moves here, it's just adding too many reads into the pot. Unironically, the only format where this move would be somewhat useful is Battle Royales, which explains why it only lasted one generation. Thankfully, Gen 7 is short though, as there's only one other move that is truly awful, and that's Gear Up, which can only be used by Klinklang and Magearna. This move raises the attack and special attack of all allied Pokemon with the plus or minus ability. So it's basically just as bad as Magnetic Flux, that's all you need to know. In Gen 8, the two worst moves are also signature moves which we've discussed in the past, so I'll make it quick. Hatterene's Magic Powder, which is a reskin of Soak but turns the opponent into a Psychic type, and Polteageist Tea Time, which makes all Pokemon in the field eat their held berries. I am genuinely dumbfounded as to why this is a real attack. And finally, Gen 9. To be honest, most of the moves introduced in this generation are really good. I could only find two moves this gen that most players would consider a little underwhelming, but honestly, these are definitely way better than anything we've talked about prior to this. The first is Farigiraf's signature move, Twin Beam. It's a 40 base power attack that hits twice. It's not even as good as Psychic. Why was this the condition to make Girafarig evolve after 20 years? And for our last move of the video, Scovillain's signature move, Spicy Extract. It's a move that raises the target's attack by 2 stages, but also lowers their defense by 2 stages. This could feasibly work as a Hail Mary situation on a teammate late in the game, or some people have managed to pair this move with Foul Play against the enemy for massive damage, but by and large, it's far from the hottest move this gen has to offer. And with that, thank you for watching today's video. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, and as always, thank you to my channel members for the continued support. I'll see you guys next time.